If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn, your host, and for those of you who may be new to the show, I'm the author of Brain Over Binge and also the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide. I've been recovered from binge eating for about 13 years, little more than that, and since then, it's just been my mission to reach out and help others do the same. If you're currently stuck in the binge eating habit, I definitely understand how you feel and what you're going through. It's a very difficult place to be, but I know that there is definitely hope for you and for everyone listening. I hope that you'll find help in this podcast, and I also want to let you know that I have a lot of other resources on my website as well. My website is brainoverbinge.com, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But there you can find not only all of these podcast episodes, but you can find my blog and some other resources that you can use in your recovery. Also in the show notes today, I'm going to link to an information page about the upcoming Brain Over Binge 8-week group course. And those of you who've been following the podcast for a while now know that this 8-week group course has been on hold for a little while, but I'm starting it again on September 17th, which is only 6 days away. And I had planned on announcing it here sooner, but after sending out an email and sending out my newsletter, the course actually filled up really quickly, and I had to close registration. But I didn't want to turn anyone away, and I want to support anyone who wants to participate, so I decided to go ahead and open a second group. The groups need to be limited because I need to make sure I have time to address everyone's questions and give everyone the support they need on the weekly group calls and also in the Facebook group. And that's why I can't just have one big group. So the second group is now open, and I expect that will fill up rather quickly as well. So if you are interested in participating, I encourage you to go to the show notes and you can learn all about it there and sign up. Now, if you decide to join, you'll also gain access to the Brain Over Binge course website. And on that website, you'll get a lesson added every week. And in the lesson, there are some audios, there are worksheets. That's where you'll get your goals for the week so that you can approach this in a very structured and guided way. If you feel like having this guidance and having this support in your recovery would benefit you, check out that information page. There you can read about all of the features of the course. Thank you so much for listening to that longer than usual introduction today. Now I'm going to move on to the topic for this episode. This is the Q&A show for September. The question I'm going to address today is about overeating. And I've received several questions about overeating, so even if this is not your specific question, I hope that you'll benefit from what I'm going to talk about. This question is from Inez, and she says, "Dear Kathryn, I've read both of your books and I've heard your podcast episodes. Thank you for the truly life-altering work you do. Due to your help, I am, for the most part, over a 42-year-long binge eating disorder habit." Now, I want to pause here and just say, Inez, that is wonderful. I mean, just to hear you say that and the fact that I've been able to be a part of your journey is very inspiring, and it means a lot to me. And I want to say congratulations on your success because you're the one making it happen. And I'm so glad that something you've learned from me in my books or the podcast has helped you in this journey toward freedom. So Inez goes on to say, "What I struggle with is overeating now. As I don't want to restrict and I don't want to be in a place of deprivation, I tend to overeat regularly. My urge is telling me it's okay to overeat and to go for seconds as long as I don't binge. And I tend to eat really quickly and almost eat as fast as I used to when I was binging. All of this does not make me feel good as I've put on weight, I think. I don't weigh myself anymore, and overeating makes me sick and bloated afterward. Additionally, my urges tell me that I need an ice cream cone every afternoon so that I have more energy and I don't feel in a slump and tired, which is clearly not true as my higher brain knows. Nevertheless, this behavior feels all very similar like my old binge eating habit. I feel stuck and would appreciate your advice very much." Thank you so much for sharing this, and as I think there are many people out there listening who can definitely relate. This is something that I've seen happen. I mean, it definitely doesn't happen to everybody, but sometimes when binge eating stops, you kind of realize that there's some other eating issues that you may need to work on. it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means that once you clear the binge eating from your life, you may see that there are some other things that you need to improve. And it's so much easier to do that with the binge eating habit out of your life. Also, I think what you may be going through is a bit of a transition period from restricting and binging into normal eating. And a lot of times that's not a smooth transition for everyone because you're so used to, you said for 42 years, restricting and binging, and suddenly you're trying to eat normally, and it's understandable that it's going to take some time. It doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means your body needs some time to adjust. When you binge, it gets your body used to these massive quantities of food, so it may be a little while before your body starts to truly feel satisfied with normal amounts. So you may find that this is something that gradually improves on its own without you really needing to do much. As you get further and further from the binging, your body just gets accustomed to normal amounts of food, and this overeating phase that you're going through could kind of gradually lessen on its own. But I am going to give you some tips and some things to think about as far as helping that process along. I'm not saying just to ignore it or don't worry about it, but I am saying that it is something that I do believe will improve over time. One thing I want to compliment you for, Inez, and use this as an example for everyone listening, is that you're not using this as an excuse to return to binging. Like, you've stopped binging, your eating habits aren't perfect, you're having these kind of episodes of overeating, but you're not saying, oh, well, I might as well just binge. Things aren't perfect, my weight's not what I want it to be, I'm not eating in the way I think I should, so I might as well just give up and binge. That would be the absolute wrong direction to take, but unfortunately, it is common. It's like the lower brain kind of knows that that line of thinking works, so it will repeat it. But the thoughts telling you that because things aren't perfect, then that means you should binge, those thoughts are completely neurological junk. And the better you can get at recognizing those thoughts and dismissing them, the less likely it will be that you'll ever binge again. So Inez, it's really great that you can see that going back to the binge eating habit is not an option. It's not something that you want to do. And I think it will be helpful to continue to remind yourself of that, just to solidify that new habit. Remind yourself that binge eating is over. It's something that you used to do. It's something that you realize has no purpose in your life. It's something that you realize makes everything worse. It makes your eating worse. It makes your life worse. So no matter what problems you're facing now, you need to work on them and fix them without ever turning back to binging. And I think that's a very important takeaway for everyone listening, because overeating is not the same as binging. And the more you can kind of separate the two, the less likely overeating will be to lead to binging. Because if you think, oh, I've already overeaten, I've already blown it, I might as well binge, then you can see how binging could result from overeating. But instead, if overeating happens and you say, okay, this wasn't perfect, this is not how I want to eat always, but it happened, and you can move on, then that gives you the right mindset to work on the overeating. If every time you overeat, you tip back into binging, then you'll never actually get to work on the overeating itself. So I do think you're in a good place to start working on these habits that you're not feeling comfortable with or that aren't feeling good in your body. So here are some things to think about as far as starting to gradually reduce the overeating and start to eat in a way that works for you and makes you feel good. My first tip might actually seem a little opposite to what you're asking me, but this tip is to not try to be too perfect and not overdo self-control. I actually find that this helps reduce overeating. So when you are trying to be too perfect, when you're trying to follow this rigid, restrictive plan and you go off your plan, it can lead to that I've blown it mindset and more overeating and trying to get as much as you can now before you start your next food plan or your next diet. So giving up that restrictive mindset is really helpful. And it seems like that's something you're doing, Inez. So this may not quite apply to you, but I do think it's helpful to say for everyone else listening, because it can be a big cause of overeating to have this rigid, restrictive mindset and then make one eating decision that doesn't fall in line with your rules and then tip into overeating. Now, Inez, it seems like you fully realize that restriction is not useful to you, that it was leading to your binging. Now, there can be a transition period there, too, in that you've lived under these rigid rules for a long time, you've restricted, and suddenly you're having an allowing attitude toward food. So understandably, your body's maybe trying to compensate a little bit for the past restriction. So again, this is something that can gradually go away as your body gets used to the fact that you're not going to starve it again. You are going to allow these foods, and the more you kind of allow these foods, the less appealing they'll be. So you're allowing, for example, this ice cream. and you're eating it regularly. But what many people find is that over time, the foods like the ice cream kind of lose their appeal. And you think, okay, well, this is not really making me feel that good anymore. Let me try something else that maybe would feel better in my body. So you could just be going through a phase where, again, you're learning that balance. You're learning how to eat within a normal range where you're allowing yourself pleasurable foods, but then you also want to learn to eat in a way that makes you feel good. And this can take time, like I've said. You don't have to put the ice cream off limits. You don't have to make it forbidden in any restrictive way. You just kind of take an honest look at it and decide if you want to keep eating it or not, if you want to kind of keep following those cravings or not. Or if you want to take a different path and start experimenting with some different foods that might make you feel better and help you create that healthier lifestyle. It seems to me that at this point, eating the ice cream in the afternoon has become habitual. So as you make these gradual changes or as you decide to experiment with different types of foods, know that you'll still have these cravings to kind of deal with, and you can dismiss them in the same way as you've dismissed binge urges in the past. Like you feel that craving coming up and you realize, okay, my brain thinks I need ice cream at this point. My body thinks I need ice cream at this point, but I'm going to go in a different direction and see how I feel. I'm going to make sure I give myself enough. I'm going to make sure I nourish myself. I'm not going to restrict, but I'm going to choose a different food. Choosing a different food that makes you feel better is not restricting. You can do this all in a very self-caring way. It doesn't need to be done with a restrictive mindset, like it's time to give up ice cream right now. Like that doesn't need to happen. You are free to have the ice cream if you want to have the ice cream, but you can find foods that are still pleasurable, but that are more in line with how you want to be eating going forward. I think I might have gotten a little off topic there, but that was all in relation to my first tip of not overdoing self-control. My next tip has to do with how to go about making some changes to these eating habits that you feel are problematic. And I want to suggest that you make any changes in a very gradual and sustainable way. I don't want you just to wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to stop eating ice cream and I'm not going to eat any seconds at any meals and I'm going to eat the perfect portions and the perfect foods. Because as I talked about earlier, that perfectionist mindset is not going to help. I want you to take a very gradual approach to this and a very gentle approach to this. I think the ice cream would be a good place to start. This is just a suggestion. You can start in any way that feels comfortable for you. But if you look at that ice cream habit in the afternoon, and then you work on that until you're consistently making a choice that feels better for you, then I think you'll have more confidence to then move on to some of the other habits that you're finding problematic. You can move on and look at the other times in the day when you feel like you're maybe eating more than your body needs or eating faster than you feel comfortable with. Maybe you try to work on one meal at a time. If you're going back for seconds at breakfast, let's say, then work on your breakfast. Kind of decide how much you're going to eat. You can decide what you're going to have. You can plan it out a little bit in advance. You can give yourself a portion that you know is enough and you know is not restrictive. And you can start practicing being finished after that. And it might take some time. Like if right now you're habitually going back to get seconds, you're going to have to deal with that urge to go back. But the more you get used to ending meals after eating a normal amount of food, the less your body and the less your brain will urge you to get more. It's about learning to be satisfied with normal portions. And a lot of people might hear that and say, oh, I can learn to be satisfied with really small amounts. No, that never works. That's always restriction. And that leads to a lot bigger problems. So it's about learning to be satisfied with normal, nourishing amounts of food that are enough for your body, that do satisfy your physical needs. So far my tips were to not have a perfectionist mindset and not overdo self-control. My second tip was to approach change in a very gradual and very sustainable way. And my third tip, which I think can really help with overeating, is to develop a sense of gratitude around your meals and around your snacks. If you take a moment before you eat or while you're eating to just pause and appreciate the food that you have, I think you'll be less likely to tip into that fast eating or that eating that you feel like you have to get everything you want right now. And as I'm sure that you have gratitude for your food, I'm not saying that you don't, but I think that all of us are kind of guilty of not appreciating our food sometimes, and we need to do it consciously, that when we sit down to eat, realize that we are lucky to have this food to nourish our bodies. And if you can take a moment and realize that, you tend to eat in a more conscious way, which is helpful in avoiding overeating. I think another important thing when it comes to gratitude is don't just be thankful for the meal or snack you're having now. Be thankful that you'll have another meal and another snack coming later. Most of us eat at least a few times a day, And it's helpful to remember that you'll be getting more food, and that helps remove the urgency from the meal you're eating right now, and it can make you feel less like you have to go back for seconds and thirds. Just take a moment, breathe, develop that sense of gratitude that you'll be having another meal relatively soon or another snack. And this is never about criticizing yourself or telling yourself that you're ungrateful if you do overeat. It's not about that at all. It's just about kind of taking a step back and reminding yourself that you're very fortunate to be able to nourish your body, to be able to eat the food that you have, even if you don't always do it perfectly. Gratitude can bring you a lot of peace in so many aspects of your life and your relationships, including your relationship with food. And as I hope that those ideas help you and that they help anyone else who's listening who might be dealing with a similar situation, remember that this is a learning process, and since you spent a long time binging and restricting, it might take a while for you to get used to eating normal amounts of food and not overeating, and also to try to determine a way of eating that feels best for you. But trust that you're on the path to normal eating, and you're going to continue moving forward, and you'll continue making improvements and adjustments however you see fit, knowing that you never have to do it perfectly, and also knowing that you never have to turn back to binging. So thanks again, Inez, for sharing your question. I know that the listeners appreciate it as well. Before I end today, I'll remind you that the Brain Over Binge 8-week group course will be starting Monday, September 17th. So if you're interested, I would love to have you in the course. You can go to brainoverbinge.com or the show notes to learn more and sign up. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that you've found this episode helpful and practical as well. As always, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.